Welcome to another show. This week, we look at some of the most controversial scenes in film history. The assault scene from Once Upon a Time in America. Gender politics is an issue that Leone's final film can hardly be described as progressive as it is. Yet, this horrifying encounter between none other than our protagonist Noodles and his lifelong paramour Deborah is particularly devastating, mostly for its realism. Having been romantically rebuked as a child in his advances, Noodles vows to woo Deborah in adulthood. The gangster books out an entire restaurant for a beachside soiree. Later in the night, in the backseat of a chauffeur-driven car, his physical advances are denied once more. In one extended medium shot, we see Noodles brutally Deborah. The scene is played out by actors Robert De Niro and Elizabeth McGovern in startling detail. After roughly 2 minutes of clothes tearing, screams, and limb-flailing struggle, Noodles leaves Deborah devastated in the car. Our affinity for the protagonist can no longer be anything close to absolute, yet the film marches brazenly on. The worst part is the chauffeur sitting in the front seat, not intervening or reacting in the least. The gang assault from the accused. Jodie Foster's portrayal of her character Sarah Tobias as a tempestuous flirt at the onset of this agonizing rape scene was a brazen gamble, as rape victims to that point had typically been presented as innocent and unoffending on film. But, the fact that this exchange begins as consensual flirting makes the scene all the more politically provocative and calls for a discourse on women's rights of consent that is as relevant today as it was in 1988. Beginning small and building to an agonizing frenzy, this scene sees a dancing Sarah attempting to back off a man that she had up to that point been physically interested in. Far from relenting, he hoists her up onto a pinball machine and begins an assault that will soon involve many of the men at the bar, whilst others conduct their business as though nothing is happening. The apathy is staggering, but so is the editing. Prince's kiss is used to devastating ironic effect during the initial gawking and physical interactions. The gang rape itself is edited so as to make use of quick jarring cuts. You never see everything, but you feel the effect. The fact that it takes much of the film to see the scene ensures you have invested in Sarah as a character first. It is obscene to be sure, but meaningful also. The climactic confrontation from Straw Dogs. In a scenario that seems gleaned from the realms of horror cliché, a rustic holiday home rented by a meek maths professor is stormed by frenzied, violent rural thugs. The catch? The maths professor has had enough, and is intent on killing all who attempt to enter. In one of cinema's foremost depictions of vigilante justice, David Schumer, who has seen his wife Amy abused and his honor violated, defends his house in a most callous fashion. He wraps hands in barbed wire, scalds people with water, and holds a knife to a man's neck. And this is all before the gun and the bear trap provide a blitzing climax. Part of the brilliance of the film's ending is that it does not reconcile David's brutal rampage, and leaves us cryptically guessing as to the outcome for David and Amy. David is left literally venturing into the dark, implying that there can be no easy answers for those that sell their soul to brutality. Of course, one has no idea if this more liberal interpretation is anything close to director Sam Peckinpah's intention. The Turtle from Cannibal Holocaust. Animal lovers may wish to reserve the right to skip this entry. The hacking to pieces of a turtle for consumption is hardly an unrealistic scene for a film involving brutal cannibals in uncharted territory, untouched by the West. However, the troubling thing about this sequence is that the butchery is being committed by the Westerners, complete with a movie camera to film the event, and they take unnerving glee in the act. First slicing the animal's limbs off, we see one of our Western protagonists grinning at the camera lens sporting the severed limb. The turtle is hacked to bits by its highly amused attackers, and there is nothing the audience can do but cringe. The scene's hyper-realism is what is so disturbing. A real turtle was slaughtered on set and it really shows. Ever wondered what a turtle's belly looks like the shell hacked off? You may rue your own curiosity. Through the gruesome display of innards and blood, and in the throes of such violence, the turtle is an alarmingly silent presence, almost docile. It is as though the animal is begging for a mercy not known to this frenzy's faux documentary team. Disturbing indeed. Big Black from the Hateful Eight. Are you starting to get a picture in your head? Your son, Big Black in his mouth? The most recent entry to this list has nonetheless thrust, unfortunate choice of words, its way into the fold on the strength of sheer absurdity. Samuel Jackson has long been the master of the cinematic uber monologue, with hyperbolic embellished dialogue being his piece de resistance. But nothing could have prepared even the most expecting of Tarantino fans for this particular diatribe. Responding to provocation from Bruce Dern's General Sandy Smithers, and believing him to be in cahoots with the diabolical outlaw Daisy Domergue, Jackson's Major Marquis Warren regales a horrified General Smithers with the tale of the day he murdered the general's own son. The general, incensed and stricken, listens as Marquis describes how he stripped the boy naked, marched with him through the snow until he couldn't go on any longer, and then forced the general's son to perform oral sex on him. To listen to Jackson deliver the lines, laughing gleefully and relishing every sordid detail, leaves one somewhere between the realms of horror and hysterics, precisely what Tarantino intended. Of course, this provocation leads to much bloodshed between the general and Marquis, not to mention the other characters. Interestingly, this scene serves as a kind of turning point for the Hateful Eight. Up to this point, the film is a loquacious chamber piece with little blood spilled, but from this speech onwards the film turns fittingly gruesome. As such, the scene is an apt, vivid, and ridiculous placeholder. Is it safe? From Marathon Man. Dustin Hoffman has always taken it upon himself to portray highly neurotic characters with complex motivations. As such, his motivation in Marathon Man's most notorious scene is as most cryptic as any of them. Why doesn't he simply say it's safe? Teased by a minor cavity violation with a chipping tool, followed by a soothing clove oil, Laurence Olivier's diabolical dentist goes on to drill his way brutally into the teeth of Hoffman's bait Levy. Is every child's nightmare visit to the dentist realized? Which makes for magnificent horror fodder. But, really, the exchange is more about a prolonged and anticipated confrontation in uncomfortably close quarters between the Nazi villain and Levy. Olivier and Hoffman interact brilliantly, their close-ups accentuate every nuance of the agony for the audience. Is the droll sense of going about the motions from Olivier, matched with Hoffman's quiet, restrained terror that makes the scene seem exponentially longer and more intense than it has any right to be. Tunnel metaphor from North by Northwest. Trust Hitchcock to do outrageous right. This may seem like the cause of a wry smile rather than the stuff of revolution to a contemporary audience. But to audiences in 1958, this indomitably Freudian flourish at the end of Hitchcock's North by Northwest suggests with a force that only a stampeding locomotive can provide, a slightly more risque conclusion for its protagonist than the fake kiss and cuddle that is the tradition of classic Hollywood. After an epic caper has led to an action-packed action climax on top of Mount Rushmore, Hitchcock is not known for toning things down. Cary Grant's Roger and Eva Marie Saint's Eve escape to the comfort of Berlin train as newlyweds. The conclusion on screen for the characters is rather tame sexually. Yet the final shot, following directly upon the couple kissing, is a rather suggestive shot of the train entering a tunnel. Suggestive of what happens next between the young newlyweds? A steamy metaphor. What would Freud say? Eating dog feces from pink flamingos. This particular scene is, beyond doubt, as hideous a scene as has ever been filmed. But then, what can you expect from the filthiest person alive? The sight of drag queen Divine eating dog feces may well be amongst the most uncomfortable things you will ever watch. Her variance between in-character exuberant winks and breaking character to retch stands as testimony to how hard it was for the actress herself to perform this dire task. The film aims to conclude that Divine's protagonist is indeed the filthiest person alive, and this obscene sequence is the deal breaker, the final flurry that seeks to push this conclusion beyond the realm of argument. Mission accomplished. Roger Ebert famously awarded Pink Flamingo 0 stars, a rating he reserves for morally reprehensible films. Whether or not you perceive John Waters' film as an anarchic attempt at fostering an American new wave, or just a despicable in-joke between friends brought to reality, one thing is for certain, you won't ever forget seeing it. Buffalo Bill's Dance from Silence of the Lambs. The most outrageous piece of script writing ever in a Best Picture winner? Quite possibly. Jonathan Demme's serial killer masterpiece Silence of the Lambs certainly borrows its darkness from the novel of its source. Yet the crudeness and sheer indulgence of its most notorious scene is willfully embellished by the film. There are few words that can capture the strange majesty that Ted Levine brings to his character in this scene. It is too simplistic to simply say that he is being obscene. Buffalo Bill is a man twice rejected on psychological grounds for gender reassignment surgery. He is a man who longs to be a woman. This is not just indulgence for him, this is escape from his reality. So, he dances with pride. First applying lipstick, then trying dresses on for size, and finally simply gyrating his hips with a feminine flair. All of this is done whilst his male genitalia are tucked firmly between his legs. The pride carried by the character makes it hard to laugh, even with discomfort. There is almost a strange dignity to the scene. Were it not for the killing, one would sympathize with Bill. Torture scene Reservoir Dogs. as famous a sequence as appears on this list, and the stuff of perpetual homage, with many a young filmmaker trying in vain to find the kind of hip and brutality cynicism that Tarantino can produce at the drop of a hat. Many have tried it, few have equaled it. So the scene is simple: his cohorts leave the warehouse to go about solving the mystery of who is the undercover cop. This leaves the sociopathic Mr. Blonde in charge of the kidnapped cop. This, as one might expect, cannot end well. What results is Mr. Blonde brutally torturing Officer Marvin Nash, and mutilating the cop's ear with a shaving razor. In his words, "Not to get information, because it's amusing to me to torture a cop." The material would be pure exploitation in other hands. Dull, lifeless, or for its own sake. Yet, Tarantino stakes his claim on the directing game by proving that he can make the scene utterly unforgettable. The soundtrack is Dealer's Wheel, Stuck in the Middle with You. Not only is this soundtrack totally incongruous, but Tarantino has his actor dance to the music in the midst of the torture, making an instant pop culture gag of a scene that could have been torture porn. It is this wielding of brutality for the purpose of fun, complete with Michael Madsen's gleeful delivery, is the essence of Tarantino as an auteur, and it began most certainly with this scene. That was our show for today. What did you think? Did you like our list? Are there more controversial scenes we could have included? Let me know in the comments below. Also, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Check out my own Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise in the comments section. And, until next time, this is Billy Joe, in for Kevin Given, saying live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.